My name is Eleanor Grant, and I'm 61 years old. Last night, my own son hit me until I bled over a bowl of unsalted soup. While I was left on the kitchen floor, wiping up my own blood with an old rag, he calmly went to his room, closed the door, and fell asleep, as if nothing had happened. As if hitting his own mother were the most normal thing in the world. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it's traveled, because this story is going to leave you speechless. This morning I woke up with a sore body, bruises on my arms, and a cut on my lip that still hurts when I talk. But what hurts the most isn't the physical pain, it's the humiliation. It's knowing that my own son, the one I raised with so much love, the one I gave everything to seize me as his personal maid. It's knowing that my only purpose in this world is to serve him and keep quiet. I got up at 5 in the morning, just like every other day. Damien was already awake, sitting at the marble kitchen island of our suburban mansion in his impeccable gray suit, scrolling on his phone. He didn't even look at me when I entered. He just said, without looking up, "Breakfast." "Hurry up, I have an important meeting." It was as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't screamed at me the night before, calling me worthless, useless, and saying that if I weren't his mother, he would have thrown me out on the street. I prepared his scrambled eggs exactly the way he likes them, with 3 spoonfuls of shredded cheese, 2 slices of toasted bread, and black coffee with no sugar. Everything had to be perfect, measured to the last detail, because if anything was even slightly off, he exploded. And when Damien exploded, I was the one who paid the consequences. While he was eating breakfast, the sound of the smart lock turning in the front door echoed through the wide halls. It was a young, elegant woman named Isabella, his wife, who always greets me with a fake smile and treats me as if I'm invisible. She came in wearing a light green dress and high heels, kissed Damien on the cheek, and sat at the table as if she owned the place. "Good morning, Mrs. Grant," she said to me in that sweet voice she only uses when Damien is around. "How are you this morning?" I wanted to tell her that I woke up bruised by her husband, that I had bruises all over my back, that I couldn't take it anymore. But instead, I smiled and said, "I'm fine, thank you." "Are you going to have some breakfast, Isabella?" I asked. Damien shot me a warning look. His eyes were clearly saying one wrong word, and tonight will be worse. Then he added, with that fake smile he only uses when he has an audience, "Look, Mom, I bought you this new makeup. It's perfect for covering those little scrapes you got when you tripped last night." Yes, little scrapes. That's what he calls what he did to me, as if it were an accident, as if I had tripped and fallen on his fist all by myself. I took the makeup without saying anything. It was an expensive foundation, the kind that costs more than $50. He probably bought it with my retirement money because he manages my entire bank account. He says it's for my own good, that at my age, I can't handle money on my own anymore. The truth is, I haven't seen a single penny of my own pension in 2 years. Isabella was looking at him with those shining eyes of admiration. "You're so thoughtful, honey. Always taking care of your mom." If only she knew. If only she knew that her perfect husband, that successful executive who handles million-dollar accounts at the office, comes home every night to take out his frustration on me. After breakfast, Damien put on his red tie, grabbed his briefcase, and whispered in my ear while Isabella was touching up her makeup. "Remember what we talked about last night. If you ever open your mouth, if you tell anyone what happens here, you're going to regret it. No one will believe you. You're just a crazy old woman living off her son's charity." His words chilled me to the bone. They left together holding hands like the perfect couple they pretend to be. I watched them from the tall windows of the mansion as they got into Damien's new car, a black sedan that cost more than $400,000. My money, all of it, bought with my money. When the house fell silent, I sat in the kitchen and started to cry. Not tears of sadness, but of rage, of helplessness. Because I know I have to do something, but I don't know what. I know I can't keep living like this, but I also don't know how to get out of this nightmare. I sat in that silent kitchen for hours watching the sunlight slowly make its way across the polished stone floor tiles. This house used to be my sanctuary. I bought it 30 years ago with the money I saved working as an executive secretary at the law firm of Sullivan and Associates. 40 years of my life dedicated to that job. Getting up at 5 in the morning, always on time, organizing the lives of others. I never imagined I'd end up a prisoner in my own home. It all started 3 years ago when Damien divorced his first wife. He showed up at my door one night with a suitcase in his hand and that look of a lost boy that always melted my heart. "Mom, I need to stay here for a while just until I sort out my financial situation." He told me the divorce had left him bankrupt, that he had lost his house, that he had nowhere to live. I, like the foolish mother, I've always been opened my door and my heart. "Of course, son, this is your home too." How naive. I didn't know I was inviting the devil to live with me. The first few months were normal. Damien would get up early, go to work, come back at night, and we'd eat dinner together. He even helped me with the grocery shopping. I thought we would finally have the mother-son relationship I'd always dreamed of. But little by little things started to change. First, it was small comments. "Mom, this food is too salty." "Mom, why don't you clean the bathroom better?" "Mom, your clothes are too wrinkled. It's embarrassing." Comments that hurt, but that I justified by thinking he was just stressed from the divorce. Then he started getting into my finances. "Mom, at your age, you shouldn't be handling so much cash. It's dangerous. Let me help you with your accounts." And I, like the idiot I am, gave him access to my bank account. It's just to help me, I thought. He's my son. He would never hurt me. How wrong I was. In 6 months, Damien had completely taken over my money. My monthly $1 $200 pension went directly to his account. He gave me $20 a week for personal expenses, as if I were a child receiving an allowance. When I asked him about the rest of the money, he would say, "Mom, I'm investing your savings to help them grow. Trust me." Then Isabella came along, a woman 25 years younger than him, with a perfect smile and an ambition you could spot from a mile away. Damien met her at his office where she worked as a marketing assistant. 6 months later, they got married in a ceremony that cost over $100,000. My money, of course. Since Isabella came into our lives, everything got worse. Damien started treating me like the housemaid. "Mom, make dinner for Isabella and me. Something elegant. She's used to fine things. Mom, clean the guest bathroom. Important people are coming over. Mom, wash this shirt by hand. It's too expensive for the washing machine." And I always obeyed. I obeyed because I was afraid he'd get angry, afraid he'd follow through on his threat to kick me out of my own house. Because even though the house is legally mine, Damien convinced me to put his name on the deed too, for security. He said, "Mom, just in case something happens to you." The violence started a year ago. At first, it was accidental pushes, then pinches on my arm when I didn't do something the way he wanted. "You're driving me crazy, Mom. You're too slow." Then it escalated to hits on the shoulder slaps when the food wasn't to his liking and punches to my back if I wasn't cleaning fast enough. But last night was different. Last night he crossed a line I never thought he would cross. I thought the worst had already happened. I thought the humiliation of being struck by my own son over a bowl of soup was the bottom of the pit. But I was wrong. What awaited me was darker, deeper, and more devastating than any bruise or insult. That morning, after Damien and Isabella left in their shiny black car, I tried to calm myself by cleaning the already spotless kitchen. I moved slowly, each movement aching as though my body was weighed down by the invisible chains of fear and habit. For a few moments, I convinced myself that if I just kept going, if I just stayed quiet, the storm would pass. But storms never pass when you live inside them. Around 10 o'clock, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was the office line from Damien's company, Cole Financial Strategies. My heart skipped. My first thought was that Damien had sent someone to check on me to remind me of my silence. But the voice on the other end was steady low and strangely respectful. Mrs. Grant. "This is Samuel Whitmore. I'm one of the senior accountants here. Please don't hang up. I need to speak with you privately." His words cut through me. For years, I had been treated as invisible, as weak, as nothing more than a vessel for service. But this man's tone carried urgency and worse, sympathy. I don't know if I should, I whispered. You need to. It concerns your finances and your son. That was the moment the ground shifted beneath me. We met later that day at a small cafe far from the mansion-lined streets where I lived. I wore dark glasses and a scarf, trying to hide the purple bruise under my eye. Samuel slid into the booth across from me, carrying a file that looked heavy enough to crush my chest before I even opened it. Mrs. Grant, I'm going to be very direct. Damien has been using your accounts, not just to move money, but to cover up major theft. I blinked, confused. I know he manages my pension, yes, but he shook his head. This isn't about your pension. Damien has been transferring large sums from corporate accounts into shell charities registered under your name. Grant Foundation for Youth Development, does that sound familiar? I gasped. My name, my reputation. I never started any foundation. He opened the file. Bank statements, falsified signatures, tax receipts, all with my name printed neatly at the top. He's using you as the perfect shield, Mrs. Grant. Who would suspect a 61-year-old widow running a charity for children? It's genius in the worst possible way. My hands trembled. I clutched the papers, my eyes swimming with numbers that blurred into daggers. Damien hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my very identity, twisting my motherhood into a mask for crime. As Samuel explained, my ears rang. I remembered Damien as a boy running barefoot across the lawn, laughing with a toy airplane. I remembered nights spent sewing his Halloween costumes, sacrificing my own sleep so he would never feel left out. I remembered the pride when he graduated, when he shook my hand at his wedding. And now that boy had turned me into a criminal on paper. I felt as if my chest were splitting open, my breath jagged and shallow. The humiliation from last night paled in comparison to this, the deliberate betrayal of everything I had ever given him. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just bruises. It was the theft of my life, my name, my honor. Samuel leaned closer. Mrs. Grant, you have to understand you could face charges if this comes to light. He's made you the face of his scheme. If this explodes, you won't just be a victim, you'll be a suspect. I dropped my head into my hands. Tears wet the table. For the first time in decades, I felt utterly hollow, as if my soul had been scooped out. I stumbled back home hours later, clutching the cursed file to my chest. The grand iron gates of the neighborhood loomed above me like prison bars. The mansion looked pristine, immaculate, with trimmed hedges and polished windows. No one driving by would ever know that inside those walls, a woman's life had been reduced to servitude and fraud. I collapsed on the leather sofa, staring at the high ceiling, trying to steady my breath. That was when I noticed a flicker of movement outside the window. It was Martha Ellison, my neighbor, standing with her small terrier on a leash. She looked up, met my eyes, and gave me a nod. For a second, shame made me look away, but when I glanced back, she was still there, steady, unyielding, as if silently saying, "I see you." And for the first time in years, I realized someone truly did. That evening, Damien came home, cheerful, tossing his keys on the marble counter, Isabella laughing at something on her phone. He was in a good mood, which was always more dangerous than his rage. His good moods meant he had gotten away with something. I tried to stay invisible, but when he spotted the folder on the coffee table, his eyes narrowed. "What's this, Mom?" I froze. My lips moved, but no sound came out. He opened it, skimmed the contents, and then looked at me with a smile so cold it made the room feel like a tomb. "You've been snooping, haven't you, after everything I've done for you, feeding you, giving you a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me." His voice rose, his hands tightening around the folder until the papers bent. Isabella's laughter stopped. She looked at me, then at him. Confusion flashing across her face, and that was when I understood not only had Damien destroyed me, but if I didn't act, he would destroy her too. That night, lying in my bed with the bruises throbbing and the file hidden under my pillow, I asked myself a question I had never dared ask before. Was my silence protecting my son or killing me piece by piece? I want to ask you the same, dear listener. If you were in my place, if the person you loved most betrayed you so completely, would you stay silent? Press 0. Would you finally speak? Press 1. Because the choice I made after that night changed everything. When I closed my eyes that night, the question still echoed, would silence protect me? Or would it kill me, piece by piece? The answer, I realized, had already been written in the bruises on my arms and the forged signatures on those papers. Silence was not safety. Silence was a slow death. For the first time in years, I did not cry myself to sleep. Instead, I lay awake trembling, but with a fire flickering in the hollow space where despair had lived for too long. That fire was small, fragile, but it was real. It was hope. The next morning, just as the sun spilled over the perfectly trimmed lawns of our suburban street, there was a knock at the door. I froze. Damien hated unannounced visitors. But when I opened it, there stood Martha Ellison, my neighbor, holding a small tin of homemade bread. "I thought you might like this," she said softly. Then her eyes lowered to my lip, still split and swollen. I wanted to turn away, but she stepped closer. "Eleanor, I know. I hear things through the walls sometimes. And last night I saw you crying at the window. You don't have to endure this alone." Her words pierced me deeper than any insult Damien had ever thrown. She knew. Someone finally saw me. I can't," I whispered, clutching the bread as if it were a lifeline. "You can," she replied firmly. Then she leaned in her voice low. "I've already set up a small camera in the hedges between our yards. It picked up some of Damien's shouting last week. If you're willing, I can place another one near the garage. If he lays a hand on you again, it won't just be your word against his." Hope sparked again. A tangible kind of hope with wires and lenses. For the first time, I felt the chains loosen just a little. Later that day, while Damien was at work and Isabella at a spa appointment, I dared to step into Damien's private study, a room I had been forbidden to enter. The air smelled of leather and expensive cologne, his trophies lining the shelves like shrines to his ego. My eyes drifted to a corner where the carpet didn't quite meet the wall. Something bulged beneath. I pulled it back and found a floor safe. My heart pounded like a drum. With shaking hands, I tried the birth date of his late father. The lock clicked. Inside were neat stacks of cash, several passports under different names, and a small black USB drive labeled with nothing but a red X. I didn't dare take the money, but I slipped the USB into my pocket and carefully closed the safe. As I walked out of that room, I realized something important. Damien had his secrets, but now I had one too. That evening, when Damien barked at me to prepare dinner, I obeyed outwardly. But inside, I was no longer the same woman. I moved with purpose. I watched him closely, not as a frightened servant, but as a witness gathering evidence. Every cruel word he spat at me, every dismissive gesture, it no longer dug into my heart. It was fuel, proof. Later in the quiet of my room, I plugged the USB into my old laptop. What I saw made my stomach twist. Spreadsheets of transfers, emails with offshore accounts, and one file titled simply Foundation. It confirmed everything Samuel had told me and more. Damien wasn't just using me. He was laundering money through a fake charity that bore my name, funneling it into real estate and luxury cars. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking, but my spirit rising. For the first time, I had the kind of power Damien feared most, truth backed by evidence. Martha checked on me again 2 days later. I showed her the USB, my hands trembling as I passed it to her. She gasped at the files. "Eleanor, this is enough to ruin him." I nodded. My voice was steadier than I expected. "No, Martha. This is enough to free me." The words surprised me, but they were true. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to Damien's cruelty. I was acting for myself. I was choosing life over survival. That night, I searched online for stories like mine. I stumbled upon a community called Reddit Revenge Stories. There, people shared accounts of betrayal abuse and how they found the strength to fight back. One post began with words that mirrored my heart. He thought he owned me, but he forgot. Truth can't be chained. I read for hours, my tears mixing with a rising determination. I wasn't alone. Others had stood where I stood, and they had fought back. Reddit Revenge Stories became my secret fireproof that even the most broken could rise again. By dawn, I whispered into the stillness of my room, Damien, you don't know it yet, but I'm not your prisoner anymore. The following week, I arranged to meet Victoria Rhodes, the prosecutor Martha had recommended. Sitting across from her polished oak desk, I slid the USB across. She studied me carefully, then leaned back. Mrs. Grant, if you're willing to testify, this could be the key to bringing him down. But I need to know you're not just doing this out of fear, are you? I met her gaze. No, I'm doing this because my silence has already killed too much of me. I want to live again. She smiled a rare, genuine smile. Then let's get to work. And in that moment, I knew the chains were cracking. Hope had returned to me not in a flood but in sparks. Martha's steady presence, the hidden USB, the stories of strangers who had walked this path before me. Each spark fanned the flame inside me until it grew into something undeniable courage. I had been humiliated, beaten, and betrayed, but I was no longer invisible. I was no longer voiceless. And as I looked out my bedroom window that night, the stars above seemed to whisper what I finally believed: I could be free. And now, dear listener, I ask you, if someone betrayed you as deeply as Damien betrayed me, would you fight back? If yes, press 1. If no, press 0. When I handed the USB to the prosecutor, I thought I was finally safe. For the first time in years, I believed the nightmare might actually end. But hope, as I soon discovered, has a way of testing you before it rewards you. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a courthouse sitting in a wooden chair that felt far too heavy for my trembling body. The air was thick with whispers, and every shuffle of feet made me flinch. Damien was there across the room, dressed in his orange prison uniform. Even shackled, even watched by 2 guards, he managed to make me feel 8 years old again, helpless, cornered, small. His eyes locked on mine, dark and sharp like daggers. My heart raced so fast I thought I might collapse before the judge even entered. This is the end, I thought. He'll find a way to win, and I'll never be free. The hearing began. The prosecutor presented the files from the USB spreadsheets, emails, and proof of stolen money. I felt a flicker of strength as the judge studied them carefully. But then Damien's lawyer rose, a slick man with a voice as smooth as oil. Your Honor, he said, before we continue, we must address the state of Mrs. Grant's mental health. Here's a psychiatric report conducted last year, which clearly states she suffers from early-onset dementia and delusions. Any testimony she provides should be regarded with suspicion. The words slammed into me like a fist. My breath caught. Dementia. Delusions. I had never seen this report before in my life. And yet there it was, papers stamped, signed and stapled together. My name on every page. My supposed decline laid out in cruel detail. The judge frowned, flipping through the file. Mrs. Grant, do you dispute this? I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. Yes, Your Honor. I've never been examined by this doctor. It's a lie, a forgery. Damien smirked across the courtroom, his lips curling into that same mocking smile I had seen so many nights at the kitchen table. He thought he had me trapped again. The whispers grew louder around me. Strangers looked at me with pity. A few shook their heads. My chest tightened, and for a moment I wanted to vanish, to sink into the floor and let the world close over me. Maybe he's right. Maybe no one will ever believe me. The fear was suffocating, worse than any bruise, worse than any slap. It was the terror of being erased, of losing not just my freedom, but my very voice. I gripped the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles went white. My body wanted to shrink, to cower, but something inside me pushed back. The memory of Martha placing that small camera, the sight of the USB in my hands, the words I had read on Reddit family tales where survivors of toxic homes shared how they fought back against lies. I was not crazy. I was not broken. I was not silent anymore. When the judge asked again, I rose to my feet. My legs trembled, but my voice came stronger this time. Your Honor. I said I worked for 40 years as an executive secretary in one of the city's most respected law firms. If I suffered from dementia, it would have shown long before now. This report is false. My son forged it because he knows the truth about his crimes will destroy him. Gasps filled the room. The judge raised his eyebrows, and for the first time, Damien's smirk wavered. The prosecutor leaned forward, holding up the USB. We also have recorded evidence of Mr. Cole threatening to declare his mother insane if she ever spoke out. It matches perfectly with the timing of this so-called psychiatric evaluation. The judge's frown deepened. He set the forged report aside. At that moment, I felt something loosen inside me, like one of the many chains had fallen away. I wasn't fully free yet, but I had cracked the lock. Then came Damien's turn. He stood wrists chained and began to shout. She's lying. She's always been weak, always manipulating people with her tears. I am the one who took care of her. She's nothing without me. His voice rose higher, echoing off the walls. The guards grabbed his arms, but he fought them, spitting venom. The courtroom erupted in noise. People recoiled, and yet for the first time in years I did not shrink under his rage. I stood taller. I looked straight at him and said loud enough for all to hear, "You don't own me anymore, Damien. Not my money, not my house, not my mind. You will never control me again." The guards hauled him back into his seat, his face twisted with fury. The judge slammed his gavel, demanding silence. But the silence that followed wasn't heavy with fear, it was thick with truth. The judge denied Damien's request for bail. He would remain in custody until his trial. And in that moment, a new sensation washed over me, not just relief, but liberation. Every word I had spoken was like breaking a link in the invisible chain that had bound me for so long. Fear still lingered in my bones. Yes, but courage had finally found its voice. That night, when I returned to Martha's house, I opened my laptop again. This time, I returned not to evidence files, but to stories. I read more on Reddit family tales where other mothers, fathers, and children shared how they broke free from their abusers. Their words resonated with me like never before. I was no longer just a reader. I was one of them. Fear had once been my prison guard. It dictated my steps, silenced my words, and crushed my spirit. But standing in that courtroom, hearing Damien's lies and daring to defy them, I realized fear could also be fuel. It had forced me to find courage I never knew existed. Yes, the fight was far from over. Damien's trial still loomed and his threats still echoed in my mind, but I was no longer the woman scrubbing blood off the kitchen floor in silence. I was Eleanor Grant, and I had finally taken my first real step toward freedom. For a few nights after the bail hearing, I allowed myself to breathe again. Damien had been denied release, and the walls of the courthouse had echoed with my voice instead of his. I clung to that memory as proof that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was loosening its grip. But freedom, I was learning, never comes without shadows. It was Martha who first noticed the envelope. She had walked to the porch to water her flowers and spotted it tucked between the slats of my front door. Eleanor, she called, handing it to me with cautious eyes. "This doesn't look like regular mail." My fingers trembled as I pulled it open. Inside was a letter written in Damien's unmistakable script. "Dear Mother," it began, "don't get too comfortable. You may think you embarrassed me in court, but the game isn't over. Remember the Williams case. Remember the documents you tucked away for Sullivan 15 years ago? I know all about them. I have proof. If you don't retract your statements and clear my name, I'll make sure the world knows you're just as guilty as I am." I read the words 3 times, my stomach tightening with each line. The Williams case. A lawsuit from years ago, back when I was still working at the firm. I remembered late nights sorting files, discarding duplicates at Mr. Sullivan's request. It had felt routine, harmless, but Damien's words painted it as something darker obstruction of justice. How had he even gotten these records? At the bottom of the page, his threat sharpened. You have until Friday. Either protect me or watch your own reputation burn. I collapsed into my chair, clutching the letter like a curse. The courthouse victory that had set me free was suddenly poisoned. My mind screamed, what if he's right? What if I really did something that could ruin me? The air grew heavy, suffocating as though invisible walls closed in around me. I was back in a prison, but this time the chains weren't Damien's fists. They were my own memories, my doubts, my guilt. Martha placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Don't let him twist your mind. That's what he does. It's his weapon. But my chest burned with panic. If he had evidence, real evidence, then no matter how cruel he had been, no matter how many bruises I carried, the world might see me as complicit. A fraud. The next morning, I took the letter to Victoria Rhodes, the prosecutor. She read it carefully, her jaw tightening. This, she said firmly, is blackmail. It's also proof he still has people working for him outside. Someone is smuggling his words past the prison walls. Likely Isabella. The thought that my own daughter-in-law was still standing by him made my throat ache. I had hoped foolishly that she might turn away once she saw his mask slip. Victoria leaned closer. Listen to me, Eleanor. Even if there's some grain of truth in this Williams case, you were a secretary following orders. He's trying to weaponize your past. But we can't ignore the possibility he has documents. You need to prepare yourself. Her words were meant to comfort, but instead, they pressed heavier on my chest. The walls felt like they were closing in again, only this time, the trap was set by both past and present. That week stretched like an eternity. At night, I lay awake replaying every file I had ever touched at the firm, every instruction Mr. Sullivan had given me. My conscience twisted itself into knots. Had I really destroyed documents that mattered? Had I unknowingly hidden evidence that cost innocent lives? The questions tormented me until dawn. My heart pounded at every creak of the floor, every rustle outside. I half expected Damien's shadow to appear in the doorway, though I knew he was locked in a cell miles away. The worst prison, I realized, is the one built inside your own mind. On Thursday night, Martha brought tea and sat with me at the kitchen table. Eleanor, she said gently, I've watched you fight harder than anyone I know. But if you let this letter destroy you, Damien wins without even lifting a finger. Tears spilled down my cheeks. But what if he's telling the truth? What if the case comes back to haunt me? She squeezed my hand. Then face it. Admit it. Don't let him use it against you. If you bring it into the light yourself, he loses the power to control you. Her words struck deep. Could I do that? Could I confess to the world that I might have played a small role in something unethical, even if unintentional? The thought terrified me. And yet it was the first thing that felt like air instead of suffocation. By Friday morning, I still hadn't decided. My heart pounded with dread as I held the letter once more. Damien's deadline. His voice seemed to crawl out of the ink, protect me or burn with me, but this time I didn't crumple. I placed the letter in a folder and slid it across Victoria's desk. Do what you must, I said. My voice quivered, but it carried something new, defiance. Victoria nodded, her eyes steady. Good, because the truth is always easier to bear than the weight of a lie. For the first time all week, I felt a sliver of air return to my lungs. The chains were still there, but one of them had cracked. That week nearly broke me. The fear of my past, the weight of Damien's threats, the suffocating doubt, it all pressed against me like walls ready to collapse. But somewhere inside that crushing pressure, I found a different kind of strength. A strength born not of perfection but of imperfection. of admitting fear, of confronting shadows, of daring to face the truth, even when it terrified me. Yes, I was cornered. Yes, I screamed inside. But sometimes being cornered forces you to see there's only one way forward through the wall. If someone tried to use your past mistakes to silence you, would you confess them openly to break their control? Press 1 for yes. Press 0 if you're not sure. Friday night had ended with me handing Damien's threatening letter to Victoria. For the first time in days, I had slept more than a few hours, though the sleep was shallow and restless. My dreams were filled with the echo of his words, protect me or burn with me. But Saturday morning brought something else resolve. As I sat at Martha's kitchen table with a cup of tea, I realized hiding from the past was no different than hiding from Damien. Either way, I remained his prisoner. If I wanted true freedom, I needed to shine a light into every shadow, especially the ones inside my own history. When I met with Victoria later that day, I told her what Martha had said. If I bring my mistakes into the open, Damien loses his power over me. Victoria tapped her pen thoughtfully, then leaned forward. What if you went even further, Eleanor? What if you shared your story publicly about the abuse, the fraud, and yes, even the Williams case, not as a defendant, but as a survivor reclaiming her life? The thought terrified me. Stand in front of cameras, admit not only my suffering, but also my failings. It felt like stripping myself bare before strangers. But then I remembered the suffocating nights, the bruises covered with makeup, the forged psychiatric report, the letter smuggled from prison. Hiding had given Damien every weapon he ever used. Exposing myself might finally disarm him. I swallowed hard and nodded. Let's do it. The following week was a blur. Victoria arranged a press conference at the courthouse. Reporters were eager. Damien's case had already stirred whispers in the community. A respected executive accused of fraud, a mother testifying against her own son. It was the kind of story people couldn't ignore. Martha helped me choose my clothes, a simple gray dress, the one I used to wear on important days at the law firm. Not too flashy, she said, but strong. She brushed my hair back, her hands steady, even as mine shook. Remember, she whispered, you're not just speaking for yourself. You're speaking for every woman who thought silence was the only option. Her words steadied me more than she knew. The room was packed when I walked in. Cameras, microphones, reporters scribbling notes. For a moment, my chest tightened, and I wanted to turn around to run. But then I saw Martha in the front row, her eyes urging me on. Victoria gave a small nod from the side. I stepped up to the podium. My voice trembled at first, but I forced myself to begin. My name is Eleanor Grant. I am 61 years old, and for the past 3 years I have lived as a prisoner in my own home. The room fell silent. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, but once the words began, they poured out like water breaking through a dam. I told them everything, how Damien had moved in after his divorce, how he had taken over my finances, how the insults had grown into bruises, and the bruises into nightly terror. I spoke of the soup spilled on my face, the blackmail, the threats to have me declared insane. Reporters scribbled furiously. Some gasped softly. Cameras flashed. Then I paused, took a deep breath, and continued. I also need to tell you something else. 15 years ago, while working as a secretary at Sullivan & Associates, I followed instructions that I now believe were wrong. I altered files in a case that may have benefited a powerful client. At the time, I thought it was routine. I didn't understand the consequences. But my son found records of it, and he has used them to try to control me. Today, I take away that weapon by bringing it into the light myself. The words tasted like iron, but once spoken, I felt something extraordinary. The weight slid off my shoulders, replaced by air, clear, cold, and free. Flashbulbs erupted as I stepped back from the microphone. My knees were weak, but my spirit was soaring. For the first time in decades, I wasn't hiding from anyone, not from my neighbors, not from the law, not from myself. Victoria took the podium next, summarizing Damien's charges: financial fraud, embezzlement, domestic abuse, blackmail, forgery. She confirmed the authenticity of the USB files and the recordings from Martha's hidden cameras. "Mr. Cole has lost his last defense," she said firmly. And in that room, surrounded by strangers, I felt something I hadn't in years: dignity. Word of the press conference reached Damien within hours. From his cell, he sent message after message through his lawyer, alternating between threats and desperate pleas. "You'll regret this, Mother. The world will see you for what you are." Then later, "Please withdraw your words. I'm your son. Don't let me rot here." But his words no longer held chains. They were hollow echoes, powerless against the blaze of truth I had finally unleashed. The following morning, newspapers carried my story. Headlines read, "Mother breaks silence on son's abuse." Editorials praised the courage of a woman who had chosen honesty over fear. For once, my name was not tied to shame or secrecy. It was tied to survival, to truth. Even the Williams case, once my deepest dread, now looked different under daylight. Victoria assured me the statute of limitations had long passed and my role had been minor. "No one is coming after you for that," she said gently. "But by confessing, you've shown the court and the community that you can't be manipulated anymore." I realized she was right. The shadow that had strangled me for so long was gone. As I sat with Martha that evening, we watched the sunset spill across the sky. My heart felt light, almost foreign in my own chest. For 3 years, Damien had stolen my money, my voice, my dignity. But today, I stole something back. Not revenge, though some might call it that, but freedom. The kind of freedom that comes when fear is burned away by truth. I looked at Martha and whispered, "I think I can breathe again." And I could. Every breath felt like a hymn, every heartbeat like a victory drum. The morning after the press conference, I woke before dawn. For years, I had dreaded mornings, another day of commands, silence and bruises waiting to happen. But on this morning, something had changed. I sat by the window as the first light spread across the horizon. It wasn't just a sunrise, it was a revelation. The sky blushed pink and gold as if whispering, "You are free now. The night is over." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. In the days that followed, my house felt different. Not because Damien was gone, his absence had been felt before, during his court hearings, but because his presence no longer haunted every corner. The letter he once used to chain me. Now it lay in Victoria's files, stripped of its power. The secrets he thought would destroy me. I had already spoken them aloud, and in speaking, I had shattered his grip on my soul. Walking through my own rooms felt holy, like entering a sanctuary. Every polished surface reflected not fear, but peace. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me not of footsteps behind me, but of my own steady stride moving forward. 2 weeks later, I returned to the courthouse, not for Damien's trial yet, but for a smaller hearing. I was scheduled to provide further testimony on the financial fraud. As I entered, people looked at me differently, no longer with pity or suspicion, but with quiet respect. A woman in the hallway even touched my arm gently and whispered, "You gave me courage. My daughter is going through something similar. Because of you, I think she'll finally speak." Her words brought tears to my eyes. It was then I realized my story wasn't just about me. It was about every person who had ever been silenced and who now might find their voice. Back at home, Martha invited me into her garden one evening. Roses climbed her fence, wild yet beautiful, much like the journey I had walked. "Do you feel lighter?" she asked, handing me a glass of lemonade. I smiled. "I feel alive. As if every breath is new." She nodded. "That's because you chose light over darkness. Not everyone does." Her words sank into me. For years, I had been defined by shadows. Damien's shadow, my own fears, the shadow of mistakes long buried. But now, sitting among roses and fireflies, I felt those shadows receding. Hope had not only returned, it had taken root. Soon letters began arriving, some from strangers, some from old friends I thought I had lost. Many said they had seen the news, watched the press conference, or read the articles. "You are braver than you know," one woman wrote. "Because of you, I finally left a relationship that had been breaking me," another confessed. Each letter felt like a candle lit in the darkness. One by one, they illuminated the truth I had not just survived. I had helped others find a path to survival too. When Damien's trial finally began, I was ready. Ready not with fear, but with calm. The prosecutors laid out the evidence, his fraudulent foundations, the stolen funds, the forged report, the blackmail letter. Witness after witness spoke, and Damien's defenses crumbled. When I took the stand, my voice was steady. I told the truth, nothing more, nothing less, and this time I did not tremble. Damien glared at me, his fury sharp enough to cut, but I felt nothing. Not fear, not guilt, not even hatred. Only release. When the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on all counts, I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. Justice had not just been served in the courtroom. It had been served in my heart. That night, as I walked once more under the stars, I thought about the journey, from silence to speech, from chains to freedom, from fear to truth. And the lesson was clear. Hiding may protect you for a moment, but truth will save you for a lifetime. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means standing even while fear tries to pull you down. We cannot always choose the family we are born into, but we can choose the legacy we leave behind. Damien chose destruction. I chose light. Life after Damien was not perfect. There were still memories that stung, still nights when shadows pressed in. But each morning when I opened my eyes, I knew I was living on my own terms again. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping women who had endured abuse. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a witness, a guide, maybe even a beacon for someone else. And with every smile, every thank you, every hug from someone who felt less alone because of me, I found myself reborn again and again. So, dear friend, listening, now I want you to take this lesson with you. Your story matters. Your voice matters. No matter how tightly someone tries to chain you, no matter how dark your past feels, there is always a dawn waiting. I found mine not by staying silent, but by speaking, not by hiding, but by confessing, not by bowing, but by standing tall. And I believe you can too. Thank you for walking with me through this journey, for listening to my heart, and for sharing in my rebirth. If this story touched you, I invite you. Subscribe to hear more stories that remind us of courage and truth. Leave a comment. Tell me if you've ever faced a moment when speaking your truth set you free. And don't forget to watch the next videos. Each one is another step toward building a community where no one has to suffer in silence again. Together, we can keep the light burning.